guys, it's Jen. This is another episode of Reframing Me, and I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Brubaker. So, if there is one thing that I have promised y'all from day one, well, I guess it's two things. But first is that I would always be authentic with you because absolutely no good comes out of this whole process if I'm going to pretend to be someone who I am not. It doesn't help you and it doesn't help me. And yes, let's not forget that I literally started this podcast as a semi-therapeutic way of managing this stage of my life. But first, I'm always going to be authentic. And second, I've always wanted to help you to see and understand that you are not alone. That even if you feel like you are the only one going through it right now, you are not, in fact, the only one going through it. So, as promised, I will tell you that April has not been easy over here. And while I look around on socials and definitely I don't see it for other people, I still am sure that I am not the only one who is struggling with this end of senior year thing. I may appear all Jen is Zen. And I would honestly say that I am proud of myself because I am. I'm totally doing so much better than I ever would have anticipated. Like, really, I hold it all together well. I feel like I actually have a fantastic outlook. I'm super positive and excited and optimistic about the future, really, like 99% of the time, until I'm not. And then, well, I am a total hot mess. So I'm fine now. And I was fine-ish yesterday when I initially started trying to record this episode. But it would have been then 2 nights ago. That was a whole different story. I had done an evening stretch because my hips were super sore and tight. I've been lifting weights, but I've also started running again after a lot of months off. So I have been very tight right now. Well, if any of y'all practice yoga, you know that our hips tend to hold our emotions. And well, releasing that tension can sometimes open up the floodgates. And then the class had like an instrumental soundtrack, and I cannot even tell you for the life of me what the song was, but oh my God. Somehow I made a connection to something about the kids from when they were little, and that was it. It's been a stressful week over here, and I feel like I look around on Facebook and with people I talk to and all of these seniors, and it's like decision, decision, decision. And then here we are, we're still sitting over here like 3 or 4 days before a decision literally must be made. And we're still clinging on to that. I'm 70% sure. And I know this limbo period is ending. And perhaps by the time you listen to this, it will have ended. But currently, it is excruciating. And then once the decision is made, that only means that we've started the ball rolling. And once that happens, there's no stopping. And it's not like once we have a decision, great, things can go back to normal now. No. And that's the thing I'm struggling with as I kind of realize it. Normal as we know it and as we have known it for like 18 years, it's really gone. And it doesn't mean that things are over. I mean, of course, it doesn't mean that. Although I will admit to sobbing to myself that night that I'm not ready for this to be over. But I know it's not over. But the normal that we have known and that we know right now, and, frankly, that we have really loved, it's over. And there's nothing that changes that. And I see that stress in him too. Not only this life-changing decision that's hanging over him, but it's also the knowledge that what he has known, what he has enjoyed, what he still enjoys, and what he probably doesn't really want to end, well, it's over. And as hard as that is for me, it's even harder on him. But like everything else, especially for us moms who lean empath, watching him only compounds our struggle. And really, it's not just me, of course. We all feel it. And I see that everyone is just a bit off. Because remember, we've talked about this before, our families are systems, which means that each of us are individual components in that social system of the family. And we are all interdependent. And so what impacts one person, the others feel. Someone pulls, and it's like we're all standing there attached to each other with bungee cords. One pulls, and we all have to adjust. The system needs to regain its balance in order to keep functioning. So the other components need to compensate. If one person in the family is sad or stressed or sick or injured or away or whatever, if one person isn't, quote, themselves, everyone else in the system feels that and needs to respond in a way that gets the family system back on track. So back in balance. On top of the lingering stress and decision going on over here, I told y'all last time that he also sprained his ankle. So he has been in a boot and in a lot of pain for the last couple of weeks now. I can tell you that I for sure didn't realize how much I relied on him for help until this happened. I'd send him for pickups and to run errands or carry in groceries for me, like so many things that he cannot do to help me right now. But now that doesn't mean that any of those pickups or errands or jobs around the house, they just can't go undone, right? So I've had to do them or get someone else to do them because the system needs to keep functioning. Now, my middle, he happened to get his license just like a month ago. But even though he had a license, he wasn't, of course, really the one doing the driving for the first couple of weeks that he had it. And he probably wouldn't have been at all if not for this injury. But now, all of a sudden, he's the one motivating them to get out of the house on time in the morning because of parking. He's the one driving to school. He's the one who has the car now at the end of the day. And it's also switched my oldest role to taking a back seat to his younger brother. I mean, literally a back seat if my daughter gets to the car first, which isn't hard considering he's hobbling, but he's needing to relinquish control of a number of things to his younger brother, which of course, for any of us is never easy to do, to give up the things that we are typically in charge of, right? Especially if we like those things. So I'm sure that that is all compounding his mood and emotions, which then, of course, is compounding my mood and emotions because, again, that's system and its interdependent parts. But what's the other choice? Even just in that specific scenario, right? That no one drives? Of course not, because that just doesn't make any sense. Things need to get done. It's like a cherry pie, right? Our family is like that pie. If you take a slice out, the gooey pie, it still needs to fill that pie plate, right? So all of that filling, it needs to shift. The family system or the pie, it remains moderately intact because it has to fill up the pan. Or in a family's case, it has to take care of all of those necessary daily functions of the family. So everything shifts and stays constant, but it doesn't look or feel the same, right? And it doesn't mean it's the same. And then there's that piece of pie that came out of the pie. It is still part of the pie, and now it has a different role or a different function. And you can put it back in the pie plate. Of course, it won't be the same as it was. So that is hard for that sweet little piece of pie to experience. Do you get where I'm going with this? Hopefully, I haven't lost you in my crazy pie metaphor. That's the same thing, though, that happens when anyone in our families are out of the system for any reason. So yes, injury. But it's also what happens when any of our college kids leave for college. We will need to adjust. Your families have needed to adjust. And when your college student comes home for the summer this year, if you have one, they still fit. But that doesn't mean that you've been able to leave their space open so that they can fit right back in. I mean, we're a pie, not a cheesecake, right? So there will be some messy moments as everyone tries to readjust. this time to having them be at home and for them to trying to figure out where they fit into this system that has somehow continued to operate without them there. So anyway, that's where I'm at today. I got it cried out that other night. So all day yesterday, fine-ish, and now I'm back to being Zen. Good thing though, it wasn't a Jenna Zen episode, right? But this whole thing does give me an inspiration for our conversation today. Decisions, 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 decisions. Just because choosing a college is such a big decision for our teens, it doesn't mean that they don't have to make decisions all of the time. They are making decisions that may not seem as big as some others, like college, but they are constantly making daily decisions. So I thought today that we would have a conversation about how people make decisions and how you can help your teens with making decisions when they need it. A theory that I teach in my persuasion class about decision making is called the theory of reasoned action. Now, the theory of reasoned action is a social psychological theory that has been around since like the 60s. And it's designed to explain that relationship between our attitudes and our behaviors, like to look at how we will behave based on our attitudes. So our decision to do a behavior is based on the outcomes that we expect will come as a result of that behavior. So basically, at the core of the theory of reasoned action is this idea that our behavior is determined by what the researchers call our behavioral intention. So the intention to perform the behavior. And that is influenced by two things. So first, our attitudes about what we think will happen if we do the behavior. And second, our subjective norms. So what other people would think about us doing it and how motivated to comply with them we are. So let's talk about each of those really quick. Attitudes refer to our positive or negative evaluations of a behavior. So the positive or negative, good or bad, moral or immoral. And those attitudes are shaped by our beliefs about the consequences of the behavior, as well as our personal values, our experiences, and our emotions. And then subjective norms are made up of those social pressures or expectations that we feel from others, like our family or friends or partners, or even just the societal or cultural norms. But the expectations that we feel from them about doing or not doing the behavior. We are more likely to engage in a behavior if we believe that these important people expect us to do it. So let's walk through an example, all right? A decision that most all of our teenagers have to face or have faced is the decision about underage drinking, which we have a ton of international listeners. And in the US, the legal drinking age is 21. So all of our teens are considered underage. So say they're going to a party. Now, their behavioral intention about drinking at that party would be based on essentially those two components, their attitude about drinking and their subjective norm, based on their beliefs about drinking. So things like, do they believe it's cool to drink? Do they believe it will make them feel more relaxed? Do they believe it's not really breaking the law because if they lived in another country, it wouldn't be? Do they believe it leads to making poor decisions? Do they believe that if they get caught, they'll have negative repercussions, either legally or financially? Do they believe that people look like idiots when they're drunk? Whatever their beliefs are, based on those beliefs about drinking, it will determine if they have a positive or negative attitude about it. And positive attitudes towards a behavior are more likely to lead to forming the intentions to engage in that behavior. Then the other part, the subjective norm. So what would their parents think about them drinking? Their coaches, their friends, the other kids at the party, their girlfriend or boyfriend, their teachers, their coaches, again, whoever. And how motivated are they to comply with those people? So like they know you don't want them to drink. And how motivated are they to comply with what you want? Maybe their friends want them to drink. How motivated to comply with them are they? Some people, they're going to be more motivated to comply with, and others not so much. From this, we can determine their behavioral intention. Now, not their actual behavior, but their intention to drink or not. Maybe then they intend to drink at the party, but the party gets broken up, so they don't. Or maybe they don't intend to drink. And then someone hands them a drink and they're super nervous and uncomfortable and kind of just go along with it in the spur of the moment. But beyond those unpredictable influences, behavioral intention is a pretty good determinant of our behaviors. Now, for most decisions, like drinking or not, the theory of reasoned action assumes that we are rational decision makers who were constantly weighing the potential outcomes of our actions, and we consider both our internal beliefs and our external influences. We consider all of that in our decision-making process, which, for the most part, we kind of are. Our brains just work much quicker and use schemas to organize things and fall back on prior circumstances, et cetera, all those kinds of things that make us process these decisions much quicker. So now I did say that I teach this theory in my persuasion class, and underage drinking is actually a good example of how and why it's considered to be a persuasion theory. So if you or their high school or maybe a public service campaign. So if something is trying to discourage underage drinking or any other behavior, it's important that we understand all of the components that go into creating that behavioral intention. So we would need to understand and address and reshape their existing attitudes. So that's why you see these campaigns do it maybe through education or highlighting the negative consequences of drinking or by promoting healthier alternatives. Basically, we want to change what they believe about the action. So whether the action is underage drinking or using drugs or skipping school or safe sex or speeding or wearing a seatbelt, what do they believe already? And then how can we change those beliefs to align with the behavior that is preferred? Because changing those beliefs is ultimately what makes their attitude positive or negative about the behavior. And then the subjective norm component is why it's so important to create an environment where they actually care what we think about their behavior. And it's important for them to have friends who also maybe don't drink, or who, even if they do, won't make them feel pressured to drink or whatever the behavior. And if they maybe have a coach who they are really motivated to comply with, that coach would then have a big impact on their decision. Another area that our teens make decisions every day about is like their attitudes towards school and towards academic achievement, even about studying or being involved at school. Their attitudes about the importance of education and studying and working hard and about getting good grades. Their attitudes all come from the beliefs that they have about the importance of school and grades. Do they believe that grades are important to get into colleges, to have a solid future? Then they're going to be much more likely to have a positive attitude about school and schoolwork. Do they believe that they are capable of getting good grades? Do they believe that they are smart or that they are dumb? All of these influence their attitudes about school. Do they believe that it's cool to be involved at school, or is it considered to be dorky? Do they believe that studying is important or a waste of time? If we can foster beliefs about school and their academic achievement, beliefs that lead to positive attitudes about school, then they will be much more likely to have those good behavioral intentions. And along with that, then the expectations from us and from their teachers and their coaches and their friends and their peers, but the expectations about academic success, they can totally influence their intentions and their behaviors related to school performance. If they believe that academic success is important to and valued by the people who they want to comply with, that will definitely impact their motivation and their efforts. And so we see like educational initiatives that are designed to encourage academic achievement. And we can do this in our own families too by creating those positive attitudes towards learning, by working to change their beliefs about the importance of school or of grades or setting clear goals or study habits. And if we're a family who encourages education, or if they're in a school that has a culture of academic excellence, again, that subjective norm will lead them to a positive behavioral intention. Now, okay, so how does this fit into making a decision? Well, the theory of reasoned action gives us a systematic approach to decision making because of that emphasis on the importance of evaluating our attitudes and our subjective norms. If we consider all of those factors that go into it, we can engage in a structured, rational decision-making process, right? That will take into account both our internal preferences and those external influences on us. And so this way, we can weigh the pros and cons of our different options. We can assess the impacts of the social pressures on us, and we can align our decisions with those personal values and goals. And when our teens are making decisions, we can also use it to help them. So, just for fun, I created a decision-making activity based on the theory of reasoned action for him to try out with the two colleges he's deciding between. Yes, it is really hard to be stuck with me. I do crazy shit like this all the time. I have already told you that my husband will not listen to the podcast. And when I ask him why, his answer is because I live with your podcast. And that's fair. Okay, the activity. It's like 7 steps. I did it with him last night and it worked really good. All right, so this could be used to make a decision between any two choices. In his case, and who knows, maybe I'm not as alone in this as I feel. Perhaps in some of y'all's families, this could be a useful tool in the days leading up to final decision day, or file it away for next year. Or maybe you're making a decision about any two things. It doesn't have to be college related. But in this case, we're using it to make a decision between two universities. Step 1, they need to evaluate their attitudes. So they can do this by brainstorming and listing the factors that are important to them when selecting a college. So things like their academic programs, the campus environment, like its vibe, the location, the distance from home. Is it in a big city, in the mountains, at the beach, in the middle of nowhere? The university's size, extracurricular activities they can belong to or get involved in, the culture, like is it a big sports school or an arts school, their potential living situation, any financial considerations like cost or scholarships. But work together to create a list that's relevant to their specific decision and choices. And then second, have them rate their attitude towards each of these factors for each college or each option on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 for strongly dislike and 10 for strongly like. Third, calculate the overall attitude score for each college or each decision by summing up the ratings. This lets them actually see and compare the two options based on their specific preferences. Okay, so that's the attitude part. And step 4, it starts the subjective norm part. Okay. This one gets a little bit more confusing. All right. But what they first need to do is identify the key people whose opinions matter to them in this decision-making process. We're not talking about at this point, like how likely they are to try to comply with those people's opinions. We just want to know all of the people whose opinions might matter in this decision-making process. So for him, it's like he listed like me and my husband, his sister, his brother, his friends. You might have on there teachers or a boyfriend or girlfriend or coaches or whoever might be involved. It might include, like, as I put it on there for him, the people. So it might just be kind of like more of a societal view of something or like a localized view of something, but include everybody whose opinion may, or it may turn out even not, but may be involved. And then for each person, I want you to ask them, all right, go through, and first they're going to rate what they think that person would think about the choice if they made choice A or if they made choice B. What would they think about the choice? And again, you're going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 isn't, they wouldn't like it, and 10, it would be super good for them. Now, each one of those, this is the part that is a little complicated, okay? And it's not hard. It's just I'm trying to explain it audio-wise, and so it gets a little bit complicated. Now, for each one of those people and each one of the possible choices, they then have to answer, do they not care at all what that person thinks? That would be a 0. Do they care somewhat what that person thinks? Would be a 1. Or do they really care what someone thinks? And that would be a 2. So then you have to do the math there and calculate. So for option 1, he thought maybe an 8. Okay. And then he was motivated to comply with me. So that would be 8 times 2. For the other choice, I thought it was a 6. And then 6 times 2. All right. And you do that for each one. Now, there were like people on there. I said about the people, like in general, like, neighborhoody, kind of locally people. And his answer was, I don't care what they think. And so he multiplied it times 0. So that's how you go ahead and you calculate. Again, you calculate the overall, sum them up, score for each college or each of your choices by summing them up and being able for then to see how these external influences may impact their decision. Y'all, I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm writing a Cosmo quiz, right? Calculate the heat that you're giving off. Are you a toaster level or a wood fire pizza oven level? So after you have gone ahead and calculated this, and after they have looked at the responses to kind of visually see the numbers and where things are weighted, the next step, and it's not really theory of reason action based, but it's my activity and I'm adding the Gen component. But after they've done this, have them do something that makes them use their brain for like 2 minutes. So go on their phone and play a game or do Wordle or something. But what it does is it allows your brain to kind of process the information without really thinking about it. Then, very last, reflect. Based off of these numbers, do they see anything that surprises them? What would they choose right now that they've really thought about it? I know that when I saw his numbers, I was really surprised to see the numbers that he put for some of them. Some of them were actually quite opposite than I would have put for him. I also think it's interesting because he kept telling me that he was leaning 70% one way. And honestly, his numbers worked out pretty much exactly 70% the other way, which I thought was really interesting. I also was amazed how equivalent certain parts were, especially of the attitudes. I think his attitudes were like exactly equal or just about. And then his subjective norm component was slightly weighted. So because his numbers were so equivalent, I had him go in then and rank the attitudes that he was basing his decision on from 1 to, I think it was 12 of order of importance. And then I went in and looked and saw the top half of his opinions, which school were they more heavily weighted to. And we looked at all of them. But it was really interesting for him to compare the two different options, see it out on paper, talk it through. And I think that it actually did help him. And he kept saying how he was so surprised. It was such a good activity. He really liked it. It helped. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm smarter than you think I am. Of course, it was a good activity. Duh. But let me know if y'all try it. I'm super interested to see. You can use it for any kind of decision, but just try it out. It's fun to really break down how our brain works without even realizing it sometimes. And it's helpful when we want to see something and rationalize it out on paper, or it's a good way for you to get to talk with your teens as they're working through a decision. So thank you so much for listening today and always. Thank you for just being here and for making me remember when I feel like I felt the other night. It's just such a wonderful reminder to know how many of you are here who are going through similar things. And that's why the community part of this is so important to me, to know that no matter how lonely this parenting gig can feel sometimes, that we all feel it. So share it with your friends, follow on socials. It's Reframing Me everywhere and on Facebook. It's also the group Reframing Me, the podcast community. Until next time, be well and communicate.